first guest tonight, and we have my new friend, Nikki in the house. What's up, Nikki? How are ya?
I'm good. How are you?
I am awesome. Thanks so much for joining. We didn't really get much of a chance to talk before tonight, except for last night, briefly. So I kind of like that because that means we'll have all kinds of stuff to ramble on about, and Max will just have to wait.
Poor Max.
Right? So the deal is I had a bunch of people, we have a bunch of people fundraising for Drumathon this year, as usual. And almost everybody who's fundraising is fundraising in honor of somebody. So I posted in the fundraising page, I was like, hey, I want to feature a Drumathon fundraiser coming up on the beat. And I would love it if you would like to pick somebody who you are fundraising in honor of. And Max immediately thought of you, Nikki, as the person, one of the people that he's fundraising for this year for Drumathon 2020. And he's doing a great job, by the way. He's like in the top 6 or so. So he's slaying, as he always does. And as I understand it, this isn't the first time that he's raised funds in your honor, is it?
No, it's not. It'll make me cry for that.
Oh, that's my job, man. No, I mean, I know what you mean. It's humbling to have such amazing support. And, we were talking a little bit last night that I've known Max now for 30 years, but tell everybody how you came to know Max.
So I met Max through church. So probably a couple of months before I was diagnosed, I met Max, and he started doing my hair then, and we just kind of became friends. And then I was diagnosed, and he, I think to hear him tell it, I think the first time he found out that I had breast cancer was my daughters telling him during children's church that they had a prayer request for their mom. So
oh wow.
So we just kind of became really good friends through that. And then he later started dating my really, really good friend Julie, and which now they're married. Yeah. But he was always there to support me and to encourage me. They both were. And he came to my house and shaved my head for me when it was time. And I think that was an emotional toll on all of us, including him. But he made it fun. I had my first ever mohawk, probably my one and only mohawk.
That is one great opportunity to do that. I don't know if you knew it, but I did the same thing when I had my head shaved. I went for the mohawk too, because it's like, when else are you really going to do something like that, right?
So yeah, that picture pops up on my time feed every year, and so it's just a great reminder of who Max is and my friendship with him. And he's just an overall great guy. He's done a lot for raising money for breast cancer and helping a lot of people along the way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. How old were your daughters when they asked for that prayer request?
So I was 38 at the age of diagnosis, and let's see, my daughters were 10 and 7 at the time.
Wow, that must have been super scary for them at that time, and I'm sure you were scared in a way for them as well.
Yeah, it was very scary. And the funny thing, one of the funny stories is, I guess if there's a funny story in having to tell your children you have breast cancer, is one day my youngest, who was 7 at the time, we were talking about mom having breast cancer, and she said, what? Wait, I thought you said breath cancer. I thought you just had breath cancer. So
breath cancer. She's like, oh, well, breath cancer is not a big deal. You just exhale and you're done.
She's like, she just thought I could take a mint and it would be okay.
Oh my God, that you're right. I didn't think you could make that time funny, but you managed to do that. Well, so prior to all of that, because I mean, obviously, before your daughters were talking to Max about your breast cancer, you had to get to that point. As far as
Yeah.
how, like, take us back. Like, how did you find out you had breast cancer?
So it was on Mother's Day weekend in 2010, and I had felt a lump in my breast, and my mom just happened to be here, and I was like, Mom, I want you to feel this. I know that might sound weird. And she was like, it's probably nothing, just call your doctor. So I called my OB, and I went in and saw her, and she said, yeah, there's a little something there. It's probably nothing, but we'll get an ultrasound and a mammogram. So I did the mammogram and the ultrasound, and they didn't find anything. They said, there's nothing there, but lay off caffeine. And I said, okay. So laid off caffeine.
Did they tell you at that time that you had fibrocystic breasts or anything like that?
I already knew I had very fibrous breasts. I
Gotcha.
knew at that time. I had already known that.
Gotcha.
And so I said, okay. And I was a huge Dr. Pepper drinker. I mean, a lot a day, cold turkey, just quit. And so it was about a month later, and it was bigger. And so I called my OB and I said, listen, it's bigger. And so she sent me back for another mammogram and another ultrasound. And the radiologist came out and said, honey, there's absolutely nothing there. If you were my best friend, I would tell you, go home. Don't worry. There's nothing there, but lay off the caffeine. And I'm like, I quit caffeine cold turkey. And she's like, don't worry about it. You're perfectly fine. I was like, okay. Well, it was just a couple of weeks later, and I noticed all these changes occurring. I mean, it was hot. My breast was hot. It was swollen. I was getting like what they call orange peel effect. So my skin literally looked like the peel of an orange. And so I called my OB again, and I said, listen, I know they say everything's fine, but something is not right. Something's wrong. And she said, I don't know what it is, but I'm just going to send you to a breast specialist. So they sent me to a breast specialist. Dr. Beth England, by the way, is amazing. And she looked at me and she said, you have one of two things. You either have mastitis or you have cancer.
Wow.
And I was like, no, that's not even possible. And I said, I can't have mastitis. My youngest is 7 years old. I haven't had milk, for many, many years. And she said, we can do 10 days of antibiotics and come back, or we can do a punch biopsy. And I said, where do I have to go for the punch biopsy? And she said, we'll do it in the office. That was on a Wednesday. And then she called me on a Friday.
Well, thank God that you were so diligent about what was going on. And that's the thing, is I'm so glad we're having you on, because you're the first person that's been on the show that had inflammatory breast cancer, which is a really severe form of breast cancer. And it's actually something that is visible, as you described. It's actually, you can see it. And it's a super scary form.
It's often misdiagnosed as mastitis. And I found out later that the reason it was never seen on the mammogram, and it's usually never seen on mammograms, is because inflammatory breast cancer hides between the layers of dense breast tissue. So that's why the mammogram didn't catch it.
Yeah, and they probably didn't tell you this then because they didn't know it then, but like when I was diagnosed, I had fibrocystic breasts as well. And what happened for me is, when they learned that I had fibrocystic breasts, they started demanding like that I get ultrasound scans every 6 months, just because it makes it harder to find breast cancer. But more recently, when I say more recently, it's probably been 5 years now, they learned that having fibrocystic breasts is actually a risk factor for breast cancer. So that, it's your saving grace that you found the one and then kind of just kept chasing after it, which is a lot of times what people do. And I say this all the time too, and it sounds silly, but no one cares more about your health than you do. And that's why it's so freaking important to stay in touch with your body and be self-aware like that. Because my gosh, think of what could have happened. So take us from there.
Yeah.
What happened next?
So they staged it as stage 3B. So that's, and come to find out later that I didn't know, the lowest that they will stage inflammatory breast cancer is a 3, because by the time it is diagnosed, it's usually in other places. I had it in my lymph nodes down my left arm. And so it was a whirlwind. I was diagnosed on a Friday. By the next week, I'm having scan after scan after scan. They put in my port, and when they put in my port, I ended up in the hospital for a week with blood clots in my jugular.
Oh my gosh. How did you know that you had a blood clot? Like, what were the symptoms of that?
Well, my neck hurt so bad. I mean, I couldn't even touch my neck. It hurt to touch. And so I had just called my doctor, and I had called Dr. England's office and I said, listen, this hurts. And they're like, just go to the ER. And I did. And they immediately put me in the hospital. They didn't let me pass the ER. And yeah, so I was on Coumadin, blood thinners, for a year while I was going through treatment. So I was back and forth between cancer treatments through chemo and blood checks for blood clots. And, it was crazy. I started from the day I was diagnosed to the day I started chemotherapy was 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. So it went really, really fast. And my my breast specialist, Dr. England, gave me 2 doctors, and she said these are the 2 doctors I would recommend. And I interviewed them both and went with Dr. Joyce O'Shaughnessy, which I understand is your doctor as well. Phenomenal doctor, very wonderful, very down to earth, talked me through a lot and was very helpful. I have to tell you that the first time I met her, I was, scared to death because I'm seeing an oncologist, a cancer doctor. I'm like, this isn't supposed to be my life. And so the first time I met her, I went in and I covered my whole left breast, which was the breast that had cancer. I covered it in temporary, those like little kid tattoos that you put on with water. I covered my left breast in temporary tattoos.
What was your thought process there, Nikki?
I was like, we're not going to get this wrong. We need to know which one to cut off. So
oh my God.
she looked at me, she just laughed. She was like, oh, this is a hoot.
Well, and the thing is, most of our viewers have seen Dr. O'Shaughnessy. I'll be sure and play a clip from her right after this because she's a hoot. She's a little person. Like she's not very tall. She's like 4 foot something, but she's just brilliant. And the thing that's the greatest about her is that she knows how to talk to you at your level so you can understand what she's talking about. But so what happened next after that?
So she spent that day with me. She spent, I think, 2 hours just mapping everything out, what my treatments would be and what they would look like. And so I had to do Herceptin. So every week I had to do a Herceptin treatment. And every either 2 or 3 weeks, I would go in for like the big treatments, like the Red Devil and, all those scary ones that they talk about. And I would go in every 3 weeks for those, but every week I was having a treatment. And I teach school. So this was all going on just as school was starting. And I worked through that school year. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. Thinking back on it, I think, it was when I was outside in the world, I was always Nikki, the girl with cancer. And when I went to school, I could go in my classroom and I could shut that door and I could be with my kids and I could just be Mrs. Wilson, the teacher,
It,
like they didn't care.
yeah,
They didn't care and they just left me for who I was and they never bombarded me with a million questions of do you feel okay? Are you okay? Do you want anything? And those are all nice and wonderful things to ask, but it's hard after a while because sometimes, you just want to say, no, today is awful, you know? And people don't want to hear that. People want to hear, no, I'm fine. No, I'm okay. And
well,
some days, just not.
yeah, I mean, it's that's totally true. And what sucks is you're right. You feel like you do have to say you're okay, especially to people super close to you, because you don't want them to worry or get sad on top of that. And so
Yeah,
it was almost like an escape for you, it sounds like,
it really,
which is probably much needed for you.
it really was.
Yeah.
So I went through all of that. And then in February of 2011, I had a double mastectomy and had tissue expanders and did all that and was supposed to have my reconstruction in December and had it all planned out, the perfect plan of I'm going to be gone over Christmas break and won't miss any school. And well, tissue expanders had another plan because they one popped and it started leaking
Oh my
inside my
gosh.
body. It was just saline, so my body could absorb it without any danger. But that moved my reconstruction up to October. So then I did a deep flap, that's where they take your abdominal tissue to create you two new breasts.
Wow.
So then I had that surgery, and then I was pretty much done after that. But yeah,
It's a
that
long
was a
road.
yeah, it was a long road. I mean, it was a year and a half from diagnosis,
Yeah, it's funny because it's possible. Like, when did you finish? When was your last chemo treatment?
My last chemo treatment was at the end of January 2011.
You and I could have been uh sitting in the waiting room at the same time,
I
because
know.
my treatment was at the same facility with the same doctor. I
Yeah,
started December 27th of 2010, and I finished April 8th, I think it was. So
yeah.
I probably had 2 or 3 treatments during the time you were having treatment. That's crazy. Did you go on
Wow.
Fridays by chance?
I always win on Fridays.
I bet you anything we were in the same room at the same time. Like, I swear, I bet you we were. Because I was
I
at,
would have it.
yeah, I was in every other week. So
Yeah,
would that
I
be true?
always.
We should totally, like, I still have my schedule somewhere, and we should
Oh,
totally
I
bring
do
it up.
too.
We should
I do
totally
too.
check that out and message each other later and see, like, were we in the same room at the same time? Goodness
That's
gracious.
crazy.
I gotta check over here. People are messaging us, so I want to be sure and check in with those folks. So give me 1 second. I'm gonna do that real quick. I actually hit a wrong, to message each other later. Hit a wrong button, so I don't have my right screen. So I'm gonna have to look far to the right. So please forgive me for not looking at the camera right now. But I want to say that Brittany Holt said that you were very inspirational,
Oh,
Nikki.
thank you.
And then Julie said, I think this was back when we were talking about your daughters, and she said, that's our Maddie. So I would assume that's probably maybe one of your daughters.
Yeah, she's the one who's thought I had breast cancer.
So funny.
Girl.
We do have a question. So Mandy asks, did they have to redo your port after the blood clot was determined?
No, they didn't redo. They didn't have to redo the port because the clot itself was not in the port. So what happened was the port went up through my jugular and then it kind of formed on the outside of the port and my jugular. So um, from, I guess, they took me off Coumadin after a year because they said it's not going anywhere. It's not going to diffuse. It's not going to dislodge. And so after that, they just kind of quit checking. I had to have a scan done about 4 or 5 years ago, and they scanned my jugular then, and they couldn't find it, so it may have dissolved on its own. But as far as I know, it's gone. It has not caused me any problems at all since they first found it.
Wow, that's so scary, man. It's so freak. Like, that's such a freak incident to have happen. And Pamela Rodriguez says, gosh, that's crazy. I'm glad that you are better.
You.
And yeah, Mandy's mom actually went through breast cancer, and she says, my mother never let on that she was not doing, quote, okay. So yeah, it's interesting how each one of us has to deal with it so, differently. Some, there's like a group of people who are like, don't talk about it at all, maybe keep it even quiet from their family. Like, I had a friend whose father passed away from lung cancer, and he never told them until, like, I don't even think he told them at the end. I think they found out after he passed away that he had lung cancer. He just never told his family. And then you have screwballs like me that are like, hey, let's make a breast cancer awareness foundation and drive this thing home, man. And so, but and everything in between. And just by being on this broadcast, Nikki, you're being an inspiration to people. You're providing awareness, and you're fighting breast cancer for other people just by being on it and being an inspiration like this. I'm going to put on the screen.
I just hope somebody can learn from it, and, through it all, I think what I learned more than anything is that God is faithful, and he does hear your prayers, and he does answer them, because, I never knew, nobody ever told me during all of it what my chances were of actually beating this, of actually surviving this. And I know people knew then, and they just chose not to tell me. I know my mom knew. I know Julie knew. Julie was my research guru. I was not allowed on the internet whatsoever. So she researched everything for me. But come to find out, I mean, they statistically only had a 30% chance of beating this, and I did. And I think it's by God's grace.
Wow. Amen to that, sister. Well, I'm going to find a couple of links here to post about inflammatory breast cancer so that everybody can get a little bit more information about that, because I think it's really important that people know this. And Nikki, I'm going to be sure and splice up this here video and cut out this piece of our interview and put it up on our YouTube channel so that more people can learn about inflammatory breast cancer and everything that you went through, and that you can be an encouragement and an inspiration to all those out there. And I just want to thank you so much for joining, man. It feels like 30 minutes went by in a blink. I'm like, really? But it looks like we got to go to that old Matt up here next. So I'm gonna have to get him on the show and let you go at this point in time. But I hope we can chat again. Yeah, totally. And I hope we can chat again soon. And we're gonna have to both go pull out our schedule books and see if we were actually there at the same time. Because what the heck, man? That's crazy.
I know, chances are.
So crazy, man. So thank you so much for joining, Nikki. I really appreciate it. It was really a pleasure to meet you, and I can't wait to talk soon. And again, I've got you, I sent you an invite to Survivors Rock, a breast cancer constituent community. It's a great community for survivors to talk about their experiences together. So I will see you over there for sure, okay?
I'm on it.
All right, you take care, girl.
Thank you.
See you later. All right, everybody, give it up for Nikki. She's a rock star, man. She's a rock star. We're so thankful for having her.